We talk so often about musicians, developers, people who play pivotal roles in creating our memories, but there's one aspect that oftentimes we tend to look past because we've grown so accustomed to ignoring it: the writers. Throughout time, stories have been told in different ways, with different tones, different emotions, and different weights, and irrelevant to what medium it's presented on, those words have impact. Today, we're going to go through my personal 10 of the most memorable quotes from the NES, and you might recognize some of them, maybe even all of them. Let's begin. One of the best parts of the original Legend of Zelda is that we're placed in an unfamiliar world with nothing to our name but the clothes that we wear and a shield. We can go anywhere we want, we can do whatever we want to do, but there's monsters around, and they're gonna kick our ass. Luckily, right above us, there's a cave that houses a man who easily has ended up in more pickup lines for nerds than any other game I've played. That man alone has our answer to protecting ourselves and beginning our journey, and what he says is simple. It's dangerous to go alone. Take this. And from that moment, we began our journey, visiting the eagle, the moon, the manji, the snake, all of these unique dungeons with monsters that are genuinely a threat to us. The game has a few more funny quotes like, "Buy something, will ya? It's a secret to everyone," or "Let's play money-making game." Literally all the dialogue in this game is funny to me, and it's funny to see Arya smile when she reads it for the first time. I remember playing Super Mario Bros. As a kid and struggling to get past even the first castle. I remember seeing all of these enemies that I was conquering: Goombas, Koopas, Flying Koopas, Hammer Brothers. There were so many different unique enemies. But as a kid, when I arrived to 1-4 for the first time and saw what looked like Bowser shooting fire at me, I was stoked. My heart was beating, my dad was watching, and I jumped over him and I hit the lever or the axe or whatever the fuck that is at the end of the bridge, and I saw Bowser fall into the lava. I thought it was over. I was elated, but nope. I would walk to the right and see Toad standing there saying, "Thank you, Mario, but our princess is in another castle." I remember scowling and looking at my dad, who said, "Looks like you got more to do," before getting up and going to his computer to work on his music business. It's moments like that that I seek to recreate with my own kids, that feeling that you've effectively passed the torch to a new generation of gamers. This game is horrible, and I only beat it as a kid because I saw the AVGN make a video about it. I mean, I had all of the emulation files, I had the turbo controller thanks to mapping controls for Nestor or whatever emulator I was using, and I had GameFAQs telling me how to beat it, so screw it, why not? I did everything the walkthrough said to do. I didn't cross the beams, I made sure that the car was gassed up, I bought the best equipment I could, and I used the turbo on the stairs. Finally, I got to Zool and somehow won, and from that point on, I saw one of the most egregious writings I think I've ever seen in video gaming history. Congratulations! You have completed a great game and proved the justice of our culture. Now go and rest, heroes! This game is absolutely dog shit, so seeing this was funny as hell to me. Did you ever beat this as a kid? I'm curious. Feel free to tell me down below. There are so many quotes that are memorable from the Final Fantasy franchise. Freya saying, "To be forgotten is worse than death," resonates with me. You don't need a reason to help people, it's a personal life goal. "You spoony bard" is an insult that I still use daily, but the one quote that I want to bring up is one that goes all the way back to Final Fantasy I on the Nintendo Entertainment System. And it's not even a quote said by somebody, at least not technically. I guess it could be said by the innkeeper, but it's an important piece of text because it taught people how to use the battery save correctly and how to avoid any issues with your save file. The text simply says, "Hold reset while you power off." And that's important. You can actually lose your save file from just pushing the power button off. It hasn't happened to me, but if it's on the cart and repeated in the game, I'm gonna do it. Another nifty little quote that always tickles my nutsack is when you look at the fountain in Corneria. The game says, "See your face upon the clean water." How dirty! Come, wash your face. And I remember thinking, chill out, man, I just spawned into existence. I love Bionic Commando as one of the first NES games I streamed when I started my career on Twitch, and it holds a very special place in my heart. As a platformer, I love the ingenuity of it, especially considering the guy who designed it was inspired by Rock and Rope from Konami. I'm glad Capcom figured out how to use that ability accurately. It was a fun time. Now, the game obviously has a lot of censorship because Bad Mustache Guy was the evil force behind everything in the Japanese game, but when it came to America, and likely the rest of the world, it was changed to generic bad guy number 1, who still has a mustache. Dialogue happens occasionally, especially when intercepting comms at the end of the stage, but there's this one guard in Neutral Zone 16 that really doesn't like you entering his shack. He straight up yells at you saying, "Get the heck out of here, you nerd!" To this day, I still say nerd in common conversation, and for me, this is where it all began. Some might have thought it was from The Simpsons, but I remember it from Bionic Commando. A lot of people don't like this game, and I can see why. It's a very arduous and tedious game that takes a lot of reacting to bullshit, dealing with an atrocious map, and rather quick encounters with this big bad evil guy, and it doesn't help that it was published by LJN. There's this weird stigma that follows them, and you know 80% of the time, you'd be right in judging them. They are notoriously low-budget cash grabs that were designed to catch the attention of consumers based on the craze of whatever topic they covered. But I personally took the time to learn everything Friday the 13th had to offer, and believe it or not, I actually enjoyed it. It took a little while to get Jason's pattern down, but when I figured it out, it was day and night. However, I did see a screen quite often that is likely the most direct game over screen I've seen to date. You and your friends are dead. Game over. It's like you take it personally, like you're the reason why you and your friends are dead. There's nothing left. No post-game sequence. You lose. Fuck you! And I took that personally. If you've ever watched my previous episodes, I'm notoriously not a fan of wrestling games from the early years of video gaming because more often than not, they're just horrible attempts at fleshing out a system that wouldn't really be effective until the 4th generation. And even then, to me, that's kind of stretching it. Wrestling always seemed to suffer from bad controls, bad camera, or bad artwork, and to me it took a long time for them to figure it out. But people loved wrestling, it was popular throughout the world, and Nintendo wanted to make a wrestling game. After all, there were already 2 other ones out, Muscle and Tag Team Wrestling, so why not put their own spin on it? Well, it might not be a fun game to me, but should you take the time to make it all the way through the game's silly fights against the 6 wrestlers you'll encounter, every single time you beat one, you'll be graced with this meme-tastic quote that I still use for when I beat games on stream. A winner is you. A winner is us indeed. This game is brutally unfair, and that's funny to me because historically Hudson made approachable platformers. Like, they seem to have a broad demographic, but they did make games that were at face value practical for kids with some abhorrent hidden difficulty, and Milon's Secret Castle was that for me. In some ways, it's almost as confusing as Deadly Towers, but once you get going, you kind of get used to the game and what you need to do to progress. Now, in the 3rd stage, you can buy a feather, and it serves no purpose other than allowing you to ride one very specific elevator. And that feather cost $45. It's found in room J, if you're curious. But what stands out to me is what the shopkeeper says when you buy it. Lose weight, ride the elevators. Not only does he lie, but he also insinuates that I'm thick! Well, thanks for your professional opinion, strange hobo Jesus. I appreciate it. Many folks don't like Metal Gear, which I don't understand why. Outside of the first few minutes of the game, the rest of the game is relatively faithful to the source material. We still go building to building, doing stealthy things and obtaining keycards, freeing people, but if you buckle down and memorize a few paths, and make sure not to kill any POWs, you should be fine. There's tons of dialogue between Snake and the supporting characters, and there's even dialogue with some of the bosses, but the quote that made me laugh is, "I feel asleep," which my dumbass thought was an indication that the guard was asleep. Nope, he's 100% awake. But in his strange half-sleep nature, he decided to merge "I feel sleepy" and "I fell asleep" to create that hilarious English misspelling. It's funny too because sleepy guards will be a staple in future Metal Gear Solid games if you continue down its lineage. This is another game that gets tons of hate thanks to the angry video game nerd. What people need to realize is that the AVGN is a character, a persona, that entertained millions of us growing up. There are occasions where he is tough on games, and I feel that Jaws and Castlevania II are the two that he got the most wrong. Now, it goes without saying Castlevania II struggled from plenty of bad translations, and due to that, if you enjoyed this game, you'll likely need a little help from Nintendo Power. I actually used it while I was playing it, just to see what tips and tricks were included. If we ignore all of those horrible clues, there is one quote that stands out, and we will see it often because so many people complain about the day and night mechanic. If you're out and about, time passes, and once it becomes night, we'll see the infamous message, "What a horrible night to have a curse." It was off-putting initially, but after playing it for a few hours, I really didn't care that much about it. And if it does bother you, there's a ROM hack called Castlevania II Redacted, but even then, I felt it wasn't that great. If you want a good one, try Retranslated Plus Map if you want a gigantic quality of life improvement. And that's it for today. Are there any memorable NES quotes that stuck with you through the years? Feel free to tell the community down below. I know that it'll be an interesting conversation to hold. Speaking of our community, we're a group of enthusiasts that really love enjoying a time when life was just a little bit easier to live. And if you made it to the end of this video, feel free to join us. We'd love to have you. Finally, the single most important thing you can do for me is to hit that thumbs up button, as it directly impacts the visibility of the videos and the projects that I work on every single day. As always, from my family to your family, good energy, good vibes, Fortefyre out.